Time is it, Chico?
It's buff
Buff time.
time.
It's buff time. Brian Howell, Bigg Dogg Chico coming at you. Bigg Dogg is out in Hawaii, and I'm here in Colorado, and we're going to chat some buffs. And obviously, spring ball is over, but there's always stuff going on, and we got plenty to talk about. And obviously, there's transfer portal stuff that's going to be in the news all the time, right? So we could probably almost do one of these every day and talk about some new transfer stuff. But yeah, first off, let's start off, Chico. We talked after the no, we haven't talked after the spring game. You and I
No, we
haven't.
didn't.
So this is our first chance to talk about it. So let me just get your impressions because you watched it on TV. What were your impressions of the spring game as you watched it? And I will say, I always tell people, do not read too much into a spring game because
Right.
this is not what they're going to look like. Totally, you've got guys playing a couple of spots out of position. You got guys playing that won't be there because there's some guys coming in later on this summer. So, but what were your thoughts watching that spring game?
Well, my thoughts probably was the same as the coaching staff would be thinking of it. First of all, it's a terrible conditions to be playing in and trying to showcase everything. But this is basically just like Coach Pat Sherman said, we're keeping it vanilla on the offensive side of the ball. We might have a few wrinkles from last year, but everything's gonna be vanilla. So I wouldn't be looking at a lot into the schemes, but I would be looking at each player and judging them individually on their assignment. What did they do? Did they execute? Did they carry out the right responsibilities on that play? So I would be looking at that, and if there's going to be any guys that's going to stand out or really just go above and beyond and play above their means, like Isaiah Hart, who
Mm-hmm.
was in a position to where he's learning the running back spot 2 days before the game because of all the exits we had. And then he goes out there, and now we're talking about him 3-4 days after the spring game because of his performance. So it's a big opportunity for guys like Isaiah Hart and people to step up, but it's also opportunity for guys to end up in the transfer portal after playing in this game because of their lack of plays that they made. So I look at it, take it with a grain of salt, but also take it and evaluate each player individually off of what they were expected to do and whether they carry out their assignment or not.
Yeah, and I do the same thing. And for me, right off the bat, Shedeur Sanders, and that's an easy one to look at the quarterback. But the last time we saw Shedeur was he's standing on the sidelines at Utah because he couldn't play because he had the injury, right? And then we find out later that it was a back injury. And I think a lot of us were wondering how's he going to look. And we know he's gone through all the practices in spring, and he's been saying he looks good. But it was nice to see him in that live setting look really, really good. And he was 10 of 14, and I remember one of them was a deep ball to LaJonte Wester that should have been caught. It was a great ball. Another one was a throwaway where it looked like he was going to get sacked, and he just kind of tossed it out of bounds. And so he really, from what I remember, only had 2 legit incompletions and just looked sharp. And again, it's going against the number 2s, but I think it was important for us to see Shedeur, looking sharp coming off of that injury.
And I think that's typical of Shedeur Sanders' day, where you can look at the incompletions and count them. Well, those 2 were caused by this, and that 2 was
Yeah.
right there, and that 1 maybe was on Shedeur because he's usually pinpoint throughout the games and practices. So 10 of 14, and you can count the incompletions and why they happen. So typical day for Shedeur Sanders. Just going to continue to build off of that, learning his wide receivers. You got 4 other playmakers coming in at wide receiver that he's going to be
Yeah.
getting together with, like he said this summer, and learning. Coach Prime said he's looking at his footwork, his reads, what he's supposed. Same thing as the other guys. Did they carry out their assignment and do it the correct way? And that's what you're evaluating with these spring games and those 13 practices leading up to it. So a lot of guys were uh, looked at, and now you got some names that we were very attached to, I would say, in this Colorado
Yeah.
program. Now hitting the transfer portal, which we can start to talk about soon.
Yeah. And just still going with the spring game, another guy obviously that stood out was LeJontay Wester, and he did have that drop, but he looked
Yeah.
really good otherwise. Yeah, he also had a touchdown catch, and he's a guy that we've been hearing about since he got here, right? And so live, he looked really impressive. How did he look on TV?
Well, I'll say this: as a receiver, we might say it's a drop, but the DB is going to come in and say, "Hey, that was a pass defense," you know.
Right? Yeah, yeah,
So it just depends on how you look at it, what side of the ball you're on. But he definitely made some plays. He showed that he can get open. He showed why he had over 100 catches last year. So I really like how he shined. Coach Prime said he wasn't, you know, showcased. It was just the reads, and it was just
yeah,
him getting open, and that's what's usually going to happen with a guy like DeJounte Wester. Then you have Jimmy Horn Jr. On that out there, and along with Steady Mob and Amarion Miller, they're gonna have some weapons to get the ball to, and we can't wait till we see Shepard come, Cordero Patterson, a bunch of other additions to this wide receiver core. So, but
yeah,
in the spring, I thought they looked good.
yeah.
Thought they played well.
Cordell Russell, you're thinking of the NFL guy Patterson, I
Did
think,
I
right?
say Patterson? Cordell
Yeah,
Russell. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I knew who you meant, but I didn't want people to think, oh, wait, the NFL guy's coming back here. No,
yeah. Shout out,
but
shout out
yeah,
to Patterson also.
that's right. But yeah, clearly they've got weapons coming in, and there's a lot of those young guys, and obviously the two freshmen, Draylon Miller and
Yeah, Cam Michael.
yep, they're both coming in as well. And so this receiver group is insane, and yeah, and so they were impressive to watch. The offensive line I thought looked pretty solid, and again they're going
Yeah,
against the two defense, but and I think it was the second snap of the spring game they gave up a sack. But other than that, I thought
I
Shedeur
think.
was
Yeah, and that was on Seats and Big Jordan too. I think that was more of nerves,
yeah,
understanding that hey man, I'm out here playing college football for real, and here it's not so easy to just go out there and do it. And I probably would expect that first series to kind of be kind of rocky for him, but he bounced back. That shows
yeah,
that resilience right there with Jordan Seaton to where he bounced back and didn't give up another sack that I saw throughout that spring game.
yeah. And Shedeur would probably say, "Nah, they didn't get me. I would have got out of that." But I remember he did that after last spring. But yeah, that was a legit sack. But it was the only one I think that offensive line group gave up with the first team. And defensively, you know, there were several guys that stood out, but I thought Jeremiah Brown really helped himself with that performance. I don't know what he looked like in spring because we didn't see practices, but I asked Coach Prime about him after the spring game, and he said that Jeremiah just kind of needed to settle into a spot. He just he was that outside pass rusher type at Jackson State, and he got here and he's kind of been bouncing back and forth, not
Yeah,
knowing what he wants to be, and it feels like he's finally settled on what he wants to be, and he went out there and balled out. I thought he had a really good spring game, and we talk about that inside linebacker group and needing some help. Well, Jeremiah Brown can settle into that, then okay, now we got some good help there.
yeah, that'll be tough. And Jeremiah came in with the right mindset and attitude. If you saw
Mhm.
the Instagram post by CU Buffs football, you saw him saying, "Hey, this is football weather. This is the type of weather they have to run the football in. So they're gonna have to see JB." And I
Yeah,
like that mindset because he's coming in knowing that they're going to have to pound the ball. And
yeah,
this is the type of game that any middle linebacker loves that challenge. They love the fact that we know the run is coming. Mano y mano, here it comes. And he made some plays, causing the fumble on Serum also.
yep,
And if he could settle into that spot and give us some depth there, you got um, Green Hill coming in. What's his last name? Is it
yeah.
right? Yeah, Green
I think
Hill.
it's Hill Green,
Hill Green
Nikai Hill
coming in,
Green. Yeah,
and
mhm,
I'm not looking at it right now, but he's coming in, and he's a proven middle linebacker.
mhm.
If he can come and push Levante Bentley, and you have Jeremiah probably special teams or certain situations coming in there, we're looking good at the middle linebacker spot. But we still
Trevor
have
Woods,
one on the hook
obviously,
also,
and
and
Trevor
Trevor Wood.
Woods. Yep. Mhm.
Yeah, I like the special role that they have Trevor playing. I think it'll be more, like I said a long time ago, more of in a pass down situation.
Mhm.
In second and long, third and long type situations, Trevor Wood is that second linebacker who can be like a hybrid safety linebacker who can cover the tight ends, cover the
Yep.
running backs, cover those crossing routes. A heady, smart player who can probably dissect those screens that you try to run. Trevor is on that. You saw him do that a couple times in the spring game also.
Yeah, he looked pretty good. And anybody else jump out to you?
Anybody else? Preston Hodge
Hmm.
played well, had some good coverage plays out there. I like what he's doing. He's gonna definitely probably be that second corner to Travis and pushing DJ McKinney out there. I like what he did. Let me see here. I was going to say Hank Zelinskis
Yeah.
at that center spot. I like him stepping up as a sophomore, taking on the challenges. Even when Coach O'Boyle left, he stayed there, taking on the challenges. When
Hmm.
Yakiri Walker comes in, who cares? I'm still going to be
Right.
the man in there. And the only way you can get to be on that first team going with Shedeur Sanders is if because you saw Yakiri Walker when you get into that film room and Coach Lodeholt start breaking down the film and he's seeing who, like I said, who's doing what and are you supposed to making the right
Mhm.
calls and whatever. That's what's putting him on that first team and keeping him there. So that'll be interesting to see when they bring in Big Hummel, I think his name is from Villanova.
Yep.
Will he be pushing for that center spot, or will he be playing guard or tackle, which he's known he can play across that whole line? So that's interesting to see, and I've been impressed with Hank Zelinskis, the center
Yeah.
spot.
And hey, if you're in that starting center spot, that's a good sign that Shedeur is comfortable with you and trusts you in that spot because we know this is not just Shedeur, but it's every
Right.
quarterback. They want to be comfortable with that operation, right? They want to be comfortable with receivers, but you've also got to be comfortable with that center operation as well. And so Hank being in there tells me that Shedeur is comfortable with him, and that's a good thing. So I agree with you. Hank looked pretty good. And I thought a couple guys on the defensive line, Anquan Barnes,
Yeah.
did a couple nice things in that game, and
Big
it was good to see.
92.
Yeah,
And
so it was good.
he's from not to cut you off, but he's from Montgomery, Alabama, right up the road from me, Robert E. Lee High School. Shouts out to
There you go.
Anquan Barnes and family.
Yeah, so and he looked good. We haven't heard his name a whole lot throughout the spring. Coaches have not talked about him, but there was um, that well off video or the one where the Coach Prime cam, when he talked to the media and
Yeah.
he had the Coach Prime cam and he tells us, he goes, I got depth charts and everything. And you could see the depth chart on his cam,
Right.
you know, and there was Anquan Barnes right at the top at nose tackle. And so we hadn't heard his name, but there he was. This was about a week before the spring game. He was right at the top of that. So he's clearly making an impression in the spring to where he was in that top spot. And he made a couple of plays on Saturday. So I thought that was a good thing. They need those defensive linemen. Obviously, we've talked about it ad nauseum. Everybody else has. The guys in the trenches have to step up. I was impressed by a few of those guys on Saturday.
Me too. Okanlola, who? Oh, my guy, Nikhil Webb Walker made a
Yeah.
nice play on Caleb Mathis on that reverse. They got beat on it the first time. He said he's not going to do it the second time. You running to
Right.
my side, I'm wrapping that up. So shouts out to Nikhil Webb Walker. Also, the guy who's wearing number 59, along with Webb Walker, Tristan Morelos. I think
Marois. Yeah.
it's pronounced Morelos. He
Yeah.
played well. I think he got that first sack
Yep.
on Jordan Seaton against Jordan on Shedeur Sanders. Also, a walk on to probably spotlight. I see it right here is Israel Solomon, number 46. He dropped a pick. I know he wished he had that back. He probably
Yeah.
wishes still running right now if he had the
No.
pick.
Yeah.
Just catch the ball.
But
But
that's
that's
a
what
good
they
call.
call, huh?
No, go ahead. Go
No, I
ahead.
was gonna say that's what they call defensive backs, wide receivers who can run but can't catch. So
That's right. Well,
right was
and
expected.
and that's a good call on Israel Solomon because he made some plays out there as well. And you talk about guys that um, you want that spring game to be maybe that platform to where it might be their best chance to make an impression. Israel
Yeah.
Solomon was one of those guys that doesn't get talked about and is lower on the depth chart, but I thought he made an impression on Saturday.
Yeah, at least get out there, get with your chance, and do something because you got,
Mhm.
like Coach Prime said, you got four more dogs coming in at that
Right.
defensive back position. So the spring game was your chance to make a name for yourself, and it starts out on scout team. You do your thing on scout team, make a name, and just continue to ball out against the best players. Then you can eventually make your way into the playing lineup. So
Right.
shouts out to Nikhil Webb Walker and Israel Solomon. Both of them with Jamaican background also. Shouts out to the Brethren from the yard. Yes.
There you go.
Yep.
We also have to talk about another, walk on who's no longer a walk on, Charlie Offerdahl. Um, you know,
Charlie.
who did not get a chance to play in that. He told us afterwards that the previous scrimmage he got some sort of intestinal injury, so I don't know what that's all about. But he wasn't able to play. But still a pretty big day for the kid because he gets put on scholarship, which I think is something that Buff fans been waiting for a while. Because even going back to before Coach Prime, the previous coaching staff used to rave about Charlie, and it was under the
Wow.
previous staff 2 years ago where Charlie. It was only 150 yards, but that was a CU record for walk-on rushing yards in the season. So, he's been making an impression since he got to Colorado, and now he's on scholarship. So, shout out to Charlie Offerdahl.
Most definitely a model man, like Coach Prime said, since he's been there. Going to give praises to the Most High all the time, and just going to be consistent and doing things the right way. And if you watch the well off videos from the first time, Deion Sanders Jr. got on campus and they started, filming the practices and stuff.
Mhm.
Charlie stood out. You always see him break a long run, and you just see the 44 running, 40, even before he got the jerseys. You just see him running, streaking up down the field. So eventually, you knew Coach Prime was going to, if he just kept being consistent, you knew Coach Prime was going to reward him with that. And he set it up with a spring game player of the year, he called it, to get his family there. And you could tell he was struggling with it because he kept saying, spring game, spring player of the, what the hell we gonna call it,
Right.
dog? So
Right.
he got that right, and then eventually, went on ahead and gave him the scholarship that he earned. So shouts out to Charlie.
Yeah, and a heck of a mustache too.
Heck of a mustache, man. I used to get joked on about my mustache back in the day. He out here sporting it. So
Yeah, give
now
him a
people
lot of
talking
credit.
about my hair.
Yeah, and you know what? I've always been a little hesitant to talk about Charlie when we talk about running backs, just because he is a walk on, and this is not to put him down at all because he's still the same player. But
Yeah,
I think the carries typically are going to go to the scholarship guys because they're generally higher on the depth chart. Well, now that he's on that, has that scholarship, I think that why not get in the mix, and they're bringing in some good guys. So we're going to see, what he can do. But you have to talk about Charlie now and say,
yeah,
he's in that mix. And, if he's your now, I mean, they currently now have 5 guys committed on scholarship for this next year. Even if he's your 5th guy, that's a pretty good number 5 running back.
definitely. And I think Coach Prime, I think he even said it. He's not just putting them on scholarship just to do it.
Yeah.
He thinks that Charlie can contribute. 4.0 student, honor roll student. Charlie is the prototype man. Is what Coach Prime said. Just to give him a quote. So shout out to Charlie. Hopefully we'll see him on the field this year, even if it's on special teams. What you see a lot of running backs do,
Yeah.
running down the field, kickoff or something. We'll see Charlie there, but I bet you he'll be ready if somebody goes down and his number is called.
Oh, he'll absolutely be ready. I mean, that's the one thing about him is he's always been ready for whatever, and he looks good. I mean, anybody, if there's CU fans that didn't really pay attention before Coach Prime got here, go back and watch some of the highlights from 2022. Again, it was only 150 yards,
Yeah,
but keep in mind that offense was atrocious, and it wasn't just him. But just go watch some of those highlights from a couple years ago, and you'll see, Charlie's got a hard running style even for his size,
yeah,
and he can contribute. You put him behind that line, and he's a little guy. If it's 3rd and 1, I trust Charlie Offerdahl to get that yard, and so
yeah.
it's going to be interesting to see what kind of role he can have.
Got some big heavy hitters coming in at the running back spot though, with
Yeah,
Amos and Hayden and even Hood. Hood ran a 10.8 in a 100 meter. Now, well, I guess I can ask you some questions. Do you
yeah,
think, and how do you think he'll be in that role of Dylan Edwards and replacing Dylan, or
yeah.
will it be another guy coming in, probably the 2 freshmen?
Yeah, well, and I guess we'll use that sort of a transition to there's some new guys that are coming in. Brandon Hood, the running back, and his brother Colton Hood, who we'll talk about. But Brandon Hood from where's Eagles Landing Christian Academy
Eagles
in
landing.
Georgia, and this is a kid that obviously a 2024 recruit that's not committed yet until now, and it's like, well, what's going on with that? Well, he rushes for 1,300 yards as a sophomore. And then he got about 500 yards the first 5 games or so of his junior year, tears his ACL. And so he's out for about a year and comes back and rushes for another 500 or 600 yards after he gets back as a senior midway through the season. So highly productive kid, super fast. I actually did a Zoom with his brother Colton today, and I said, "Well, tell me about your brother." And he goes, "He is the best running back in the country." And
Wow.
obviously he's biased; he's his brother, but he goes that kid is really impressive. And Colton was telling me when Colton was a senior and Brandon was a junior, that was when Brandon got hurt. And Colton was playing quarterback. And he said when Brandon got hurt, he goes, that changed our team, that changed our offense. And, all of a sudden that major weapon was gone. But, again, it's obviously it's a brother talking, but, sometimes we hear brothers they they don't talk that nice about each other. He had super high praise, for his brother, saying this is the best high school running back in the country. And so, yeah, I definitely think he can be. He's a bit bigger than Dylan,
Yeah.
but Dylan was what 5'8", 170,
I
5'9".
think he got up to like 180 this offspring or this off season.
Yeah, and this kid I've seen listed at 5'10", 185, so a little bit bigger than Dylan, but he's super fast. And
Yeah.
so I think, again, even if he's a depth piece behind some of those veterans now they have at running back, that's a pretty good depth.
Him and Michael Welch to build off of.
Yeah.
That's
Who
looking good back there.
knew
So
each other and played against each other in youth football, apparently.
yeah, out of Georgia. And
Yeah.
you talk about that connection that they have out of Eagles Landing. There's another guy that came over from Eagles Landing also, the big fella, Big Zach
Mhm.
Owens. They call him Big Flapjack. They
Right.
add to that offensive line another 6'6", 350-pounder plus. What can he bring? Do we expect to see him on the field, early, or is he more of a project guy and we'll see him probably a couple years from now?
Yeah, I would imagine that he's a good depth piece and probably a backup coming in. Um, you know, played this last year, redshirted at Clemson, only played a few snaps. Huge kid. You mentioned it, 6'6", 360 or something like that. Huge kid. So I would imagine that maybe a depth piece, but there you go, 375 even. That's huge. That's big. But I really honestly would not count anybody out. If they're coming in here, they're coming in here to compete. And so clearly those offensive linemen have got to, the ones that are already here, they better hold him off because, I'll be curious to see what he brings. But if nothing else, that's a really nice depth piece. And it's interesting, this little Eagles Landing Christian Academy pipeline they're building here. You get 3 guys in one weekend and, the connection. Talk about the connection that they have
Oh,
all these guys with Coach Prime.
well, actually, a lot of people have seen Pastor E. Dewey Smith with Coach Prime this past season and featured, I think, in the Coach Prime series also. But
Mhm.
he's been, working the grounds and working the guys that he knows, and he has connections in that area with the Eagles Landing High School, and those 3 guys are all connected. And another guy that just entered the portal. I don't know if we could talk about. He's from Eagles Landing High School. He actually plays safety he's in the portal right now, right? So we can talk
Yeah,
about him. He's from
yeah.
Arkansas.
Hey,
RJ Johnson, yeah.
we don't work for CU. We can talk about these
We
guys.
can talk about him. Yeah, that's right.
Well, and I'll
So,
tell you this too. When I talked to Colton today, he actually referred to E. Dewey Smith as an uncle. He
yeah,
goes, he's not actually my uncle. He goes, but that's how close
that's the
we are.
relationship. Yeah.
I call him uncle. And so, and yeah, all of a sudden this afternoon, was RJ Johnson goes into the portal, and within 20 minutes, E. Dewey Smith is tweeting out the eyeball emoji, and it's like, huh, all right. And when
Right.
you look at Eagles Landing Christian Academy, this is not a coincidence that 3 guys from Eagles Landing just committed, and now he goes in the portal, and E. Dewey Smith is tweeting about it. So, um, you know, clearly, you want to wait for a kid to make his make his announcement, but you connect all the dots, and it looks pretty likely that
Yeah.
that RJ Johnson's going to be a Buff at some point
And
here soon.
Even Coach Prime said everybody knows somebody that knows somebody that knows somebody. So
Right,
it's going on, dog. It's going on.
right.
So if we can land that guy, 6'2", I think, rangy safety from Arkansas,
Yep.
can really cover back there on that back end. So you have him with Shiloh and Cameron Simmer Craig, and the other depth pieces that we have at the safety spot. I think it'll be a great addition with him and shoot, we looking also at the defensive line spot heavy also with Big Derek Harmon. I think he's been rumored as
Mhm.
he came over on a visit, had a visit to Miami scheduled along with Big Burrow, his other defensive line teammate from Michigan State. Burrow is going, but he's going to stay and not go. Well, he canceled that visit after going to
Yeah,
USC and Colorado. So I guess his decision is going to be between Colorado and USC. I really like both of those defensive linemen to come join the Buffs, but it
yeah.
looks like we're kind of honing in on Harmon. How is it looking? Have you heard anything on that end?
Haven't heard much on that one other than just what everybody else is seeing, and obviously it's a good sign, when a guy comes to Boulder and then he cancels a visit somewhere else. That's a pretty good sign that he likes Boulder, and uh, you can never have too many good defensive linemen. And even if they like the guys they have now, you add another one that is huge for this team, and you can rotate those guys in, and that's one spot that I think guys understand, and they don't want to play every play. And
Yeah,
those guys understand there's going to be rotation, and if you play 20 snaps in a game as a defensive lineman, that's a lot of work, and those guys are okay with that. So you need rotation at defensive line, probably more so than a lot of other spots, and so those guys get tired, especially
yeah,
against these college offenses, and so you can never have too many of those guys. And so I look at him as being a potential guy coming in here for sure.
that would be my number one position on the football field as far as rotation wise. Defensive
Yeah.
line, um, every if you have enough, you can go every 2 to 3 plays.
Yep.
And I think that's what Coach Prime been wanting to do, and we see that happening. I think with the guys who are leaving the program and the guys that
Mhm.
Coach Prime are bringing in, because if there is a way that we can, you know, utilize the full roster from top to bottom, from number one on the depth chart to number 5 on the depth chart, to where they're just not bodies on the sideline, to where we can actually
Yeah.
use these guys, to where we can improve and go from here to here.
Yeah.
That's what I think we're doing, and that's why we're seeing a lot of guys who were probably not really playing last year, uh, looked at as being a development piece, a project last
Mhm.
year, even coming to this year still down on the depth chart. We seeing those guys going to the portal, and Coach Primer's staff taking their chance on guys to come in and fill that role, who fits the mold and who probably, um, had some production in their past college career.
Yeah, and that's the tough thing about the portal is it's so hard to develop now because guys don't want to stick around in that development. And I don't know Jaden Miller or Jones, but I use him as an example. That's a kid that's probably ready to play. We've talked about him, but how is he going to get on the field? Ahead of some of those other safeties, and again, I don't know him. I haven't talked to him, but that's the type of thing, a situation where you see that kid wants to play somewhere. He can probably have a better chance to play somewhere else. But kids don't want to stick around and develop if they don't have to. But that's where I love some of these new transfers coming in. You're getting guys that maybe spent 1 year at a school, like Colton Hood, 1 year at Auburn, and
Yeah,
now he's coming here. Uh, they're replenishing that younger class, right? And
yep,
that's been one of the knocks this offseason is like, well, this is no way to sustain a program because they're getting all these transfers. Well, if you get transfers that have been in college only a year, then and we've talked about it before, but you're building that depth in the younger classes, and they're adding some numbers down there, and so you like that because let's say a guy like Colton Hood, comes in here, maybe he doesn't play a ton this year, but when a Travis or some of these guys graduate, Preston Hodge, he knows he's got a shot next year. Looks like we lost Big Dog, so I might have to carry it until he gets here. But yeah, I do like a lot of those young guys, and Coach Prime
hold
is
the
building
tackle,
that depth. There you are. I was trying to carry it for a little bit, but yeah,
yeah, there you go.
I do think Coach Prime is building that depth a little bit in those younger classes, and even one of the knocks after signing day was, oh, we only signed 6 high school kids. Well, now they've got 10 or 11, because
Yep.
you're adding some depth there as well. So they're building this roster a little bit in the back end as well.
Everybody try to judge Coach Prime or whatever off of off of how everybody else is doing the job. You can't do that,
Yeah,
man. You can't judge him on the same scale. I think judge him on a curve.
right.
Everybody try to say, well, he didn't bring in this many players during that time. Well, that's the way they did it. We're probably
Yeah,
taking a little bit more time to evaluate. We know that other guys going to come into the portal. There's a different way to do it. Like they say down south, there's more than one way to skin a cat, right?
that's right. Well, you're
People
right,
don't get me.
and and people also will judge after certain phases of roster development, right? So after the signing day in December, there's a whole bunch of stuff about, man, they're not building through the high school ranks. Like, well, they realize that at that point there's still 9 months before the season starts. And so
Right.
if you look at building a house, if you judge building a house just on the frame going up, you're like, well, that house looks terrible. Well, okay. Well, then everything else gets put together, but there's no paint or anything on it yet, and the windows aren't in yet. Like, well, that house looks terrible. Well, it's not done yet.
Right.
They're still not done building this roster, and so you have to wait until this roster build is complete to really judge this team. And there's still about 10 spots they could fill scholarship wise, and so it's really going to be probably June before you can look at this roster and say, yeah, now it's probably complete. And there'll still be maybe a couple spots here and there that change, but by
Hmm.
about June, you can look at it and say, yep, now it's probably complete. So
Yeah.
it's too early to judge. It's been too early to judge this whole time.
Exactly. And shoot, I keep saying it's going to be more leave, and I said that Saturday on live is going to be more leave. Now we see
Yeah.
Kofi Taylor Barracks, and officially Bishop Thomas is in the portal. I guess we can talk about that now with those guys leaving out. Kofi Taylor Barracks, if I can pull this up, freshman linebacker entering the transfer
Mhm.
portal after one season. And then Bishop Thomas officially entering the portal. Then over the weekend, we had Amarion Cooper enter the portal along with a walk-on. I can't call his name right now, Kendall Stewart. So, and
Yep.
I even said this: Coach Prime and the Buffs are the only team that walk-ons get talked about when they enter the portal. So
Yeah.
um, what do you have to say about those guys entering the portal, Kofi and Omarion and all the other guys?
Yeah, Amarion, it's tough because I thought he played some good football last year, and just kind of lost his spot and was lost in the shuffle a little bit. But I kind of called him going to the portal a few weeks ago. Kevin Mathis talked to us, and he was talking about Amarion playing safety, and he actually said he's going to have probably a lesser role than he had last year, but an important role. A veteran player like that doesn't want to hear lesser role, and so when you've got 1 year left to play football and you've been a part-time starter at Florida State and you were a full-time starter here at the beginning of last year, you don't want to hear lesser role going into your last year. And so I thought,
Let me ask you a question about that too, since you
yeah,
said it, and maybe I could play a different devil's advocate, so to speak. So if let's say Marion and I came in and like you said, I have 1 year left, and they tell me a lesser role, but it's a important role. It's like a Robert Horry had a lesser role on the Lakers, but he got in the Rockets, but he has and the Spurs, but he has 5 rings.
yeah,
You
yeah,
could play a lesser role, but you could play that role that can lead you to success and the networking capabilities of these guys that he's being coached by. They can't vouch for him and say, "Hey, we had him. He played well the first year at corner. Now we moved him to this position. He adapted
yeah,
well. It was a lesser role, but he made it a bigger role. We thought it was going to be a lesser role, but actually, when it came to the season, it was one of our most important roles. And this actually can. But now you're in the transfer portal. Do you even have somewhere to go? Have you talked to
yeah.
coaches beforehand? Or are you just jumping in the portal because you feel like that's my question, and that's how I feel about it. Are you sure about what you're doing? And
Yeah.
could you have made this role and turn it into something bigger than what it is?
And that's a great point because it could also be a situation where it's like, hey, you're going to be in this role, which is different than what you're used to, but this role might help you get to the NFL. It could be
Right.
something like that as well.
Yeah.
But and I understand all that, but I also look at Omarion and his situation, and it's like he's been a corner, and if you're behind Hodge and McKinney and Travis, it's like, okay, well, I'm not going to start there,
Hmm.
and now you're at safety, and you're not going to start ahead of Shiloh or Cam, and so it's like, well, what kind of role am I going to play?
Yeah.
And so it's still hard, uh, I think, for a player like that that's only got 1 year left to maybe look at that and say, yeah, I'll accept 15 snaps a game when, like, I could go to, and I'm just making this up, but UTSA and
Yeah.
start and play 70 snaps a game,
But well,
and
but do you have that in place before you hit that portal? That's my question. Because if
right.
you can go to UTSA, or I'll use my UAB for example. I'll use
Yeah.
UAB. If you can go there and play, then I'm all for it. Yeah. But do
Yeah.
you have that set up beforehand, or are you just jumping in the portal and hoping that
Yeah.
one of the coaches from those programs reach out to you? That's my
Well,
question, and not just Amarion Cooper, but anybody. That goes for anybody
right.
entering the transfer portal.
That goes for anybody, and I would guess like a guy like Amarion probably does, because you look at RJ Johnson, who we've talked about, and say, yeah, he's looks like he's got a pretty clear plan, right? So
Mm-hmm.
we don't know who Amarion knows, that maybe he's got something, maybe he's talked to some teammates or reached out to an assistant somewhere else, but he's also experienced enough that I think even if he didn't, he's one guy. I think even if he doesn't have a plan already, he jumps in the portal and will be sought after because he's been a starter at 2 Power 5 programs. And if you're a Utah State, a UTSA, something like that, you're like, man, we can go grab this experienced
Right.
corner right now. And so he's one guy. I think most guys probably need that plan. All guys, it helps. But I think Omarion's one guy that if you went in there without that plan, then, I think he's okay.
He should be okay. Yeah. Okay. All right.
Now,
I
Kofi
like that.
Taylor Barracks, a Kofi Taylor Barracks is different,
Yeah.
because he doesn't have anything on tape, right? And so that's one that maybe you've got to have that plan in place ahead of time, because he doesn't have anything on tape. Omarion's got a ton on tape.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, best wishes to Kofi Taylor Barracks. Also, we saw
Mhm.
him wishing well too, and that's 2 years in a row. Our London players in and out. As
Yeah,
hopefully we have better success with Yaya Atia coming in, the big offensive lineman. But we saw Kofi Taylor Barracks wishing him well as he signed to Colorado, but now Barracks is on his way out. Do you what would be the reason you think he's leaving right now?
I would imagine for him. And again, I did a Zoom with him before he got here last year, and that's the only time I've talked to him. So I don't know right now, but I would imagine opportunity. Maybe he just didn't see it right now. And again, these guys want to play, and this is a young guy that doesn't have a lot of football experience because NFL Academy. He's only been playing the game a couple years. Didn't play last year. Only got into one game, and maybe he just doesn't see that opportunity getting on the field right now. I mean, he was pretty. I think he was third or fourth on the depth chart,
Yeah,
and even before they started adding new guys in here. And
right.
so, I don't see that opportunity for him this year. He probably sees that, and he's a guy that could probably go to a smaller school and play right away.
Exactly. And I think that's what he needs, playing experience. Coming
Yeah,
from NFL Academy over in London, just getting that playing experience in American college football will be good for him, no matter
and
the school.
I'll say this too. I just thought about this, but the way the transfer situation is set up now, where you can transfer multiple times,
Yeah.
it's not a bad idea for guys like a Kofi. That okay, you get that offer and you go to Colorado, and you're not ready for it yet, and okay, now I'm going to go to an FCS or like a G5 type of school, ball out for a year or two,
And
and
get
now
back.
Power Fives look at you again and say, "Ooh, that guy's good," and now
Yeah.
you get back into Power Five and prove yourself again. So I think we're going to see that path from a lot more players going forward now that you can transfer multiple times. Like, all right, it didn't work out here. Let's go try something else and then jump back up.
All right. We got a little bit of controversy, I guess. I didn't even read all the way into it, but you got some players um, really stepping up and putting out positive messages on Twitter for Coach Prime. I'm thinking it in response of the walk-on player that kind of said Coach Prime was ushering everybody out in a disappointing way and things of that nature. But
Yeah.
now you have players like Tyler Brown stepping up and several others. With and even the guys who are leaving, putting out their positive words and sticking up for their coach, Deion Sanders. Any words or any thoughts on that, or just any comments on it?
Yeah, and actually, and there was a couple scholarship guys that were talking in that too in that article, and even Shedeur. One of them
Yeah,
was a safety, Xavier Smith, who's a good young player on that 2022 team. But even Shedeur, made a comment like, to be honest, I never heard of him, so he must have been mid, and you know, eh, maybe not the best response from the starting quarterback, but at the same time,
That's called being savage, Brian. That's a savage
well,
response right there. He's messing
and
with.
it's
You say
all.
something about my pops, I got something for you, dog.
I was just gonna say that it's also a guy that is on social media a lot and hears a lot of crap being thrown about his dad,
Exactly. You feel me?
so you can understand that a little bit. But hey, I put out my comments on Twitter earlier this evening, and look, the Athletic article that just came out, that's like the third or fourth one we've seen like this. Like, when are people going to let this go with it? Like, we get it. There were some guys that were ushered out and they're unhappy about it, but that happens at programs all over the place.
Exactly.
And yes, Coach Prime is more public about it, and yes, he might be a little more harsh about it. We know Coach Prime is blunt, right? And yeah, you probably want to. A lot of these comments are like, "Man, that was the only time I ever met Coach Prime," and they're like, "Well, okay,
It's
I know that stinks, but at the same time, people also have to understand, and Coach Prime has said this, that if you come into a business that's failing, are you going to keep the people that have made this business fail, or are you going to come in here because your job is to turn things around?" He came in here, his job was to turn around the worst team in the country, and part of that is I need to flush guys out of here that have done nothing
best
but
as
lose here.
possible.
That have done nothing but lose here, and if they don't, show that they're ready to, buy in here, they need to get out of here. And we've
Right.
seen it. Trevor Woods bought in. Marvin Ham, was a starter for part of the year last year. He was a guy that bought in and returned last year. Mikey Harrison was a guy that came back from 2022 and he bought in, had a great season. So there were some guys that bought in. Charlie Offerdahl, right? He was on this team.
Ben
So
Finiseth.
yeah, Ben Finiseth. There's some guys on this team that have bought in and stayed with it, but that's the job of a coach. And it was a perfect storm for Coach Prime in that he was inheriting the worst roster in the country, and all the NCAA rules were set up to allow him to churn over the roster that much in 1 year.
Yeah.
That's never happened before because of the way the rules were set up last year. That he could do that. Well, that's his job, and so I have no problem with how he did it. It's just cutthroat and it's harsh to see, but at the same time, in any business, right? If you're not pulling your weight as an employee, why would they keep you?
Right.
And the players are fought for this system to where they're sort of like employees now. The downside is you've got a lot of benefits now. The downside is you better perform or else you're out the door.
And I think the only difference is, well, two differences. Coach Prime is a celebrity, and a lot of guys wanted to meet him, and they were looking at it as they're meeting a celebrity, not meeting their new head coach. So it was like, well,
Right.
I didn't get to meet him, and then, then the other thing is, there's cameras on, so we're getting the public is getting to see it. When normally, 99% of all other coaches come in there and say the same thing, and nobody would never see it, nobody would ever hear about it. But it's the same words,
Right.
and but he has the cameras on him, which he's
Yeah.
not shy about. He said he's going to show everything,
Right.
the good and the bad. Take it how you want it, but that's just what it is. So, I like what he's doing. I still think he's adding to those groceries
Yeah.
each year. Bringing in groceries on whatever budget he has. And I said this on my live. He probably couldn't get on that first go around at the grocery store. He couldn't get a name brand peanut butter.
Yeah.
But this time he gonna throw that name that what General Foods whatever peanut
Yeah.
butter out, that hard peanut butter. He gonna go get him some nice creamy or crunchy Jiffy or Peter Pan.
Yeah.
Or whatever it is.
Right. He's going to
he's
get
gonna
it.
replace those things.
Well, and think about, I mean, if you're a fan of a team, wouldn't you be, and your team's been losing, wouldn't you be upset if you change head coaches and the new head coach comes in and keeps everybody and
Like
doesn't
what?
make changes? You're like,
Like
what
what's
are you
he doing?
doing? Like, you just come in here and like not do your job. And so this is just the way it's supposed to work. And it just looks harsh because the sheer numbers are large and yes, the cameras are on. And again, he's, as you pointed out, he's a celebrity. And, Hey, I wrote back to somebody. One of the athletic writers kind of responded back to me, and I wrote back to her, and I was like, "Look, when is somebody going to write the same humanizing stories to guys that get pushed out of other programs?"
Hmm.
And it's not just football. I promise you, it's happening in men's and women's basketball, and it's probably
Right.
happening in soccer and lacrosse, things like that. To where, hey,
Right.
we need your roster spot, and you're not playing, and you're not going to play here. That's just that's happening
We'd
all over the
rather
place. So,
we'd rather take a chance on identifying somebody and bringing somebody in from the portal, and I think that's
right,
just the business of college football right now. And I said business because that's what it is, and that's what it's definitely headed to, full fledged
and
business
that
wise.
and that's my only real issue with like the athletic articles that that's like the third or fourth piece we've read like this, and this is the only program that people are pointing out these talking to these players about how they were kicked out. Like, it's happening everywhere. Why do people continually go to one program? It's because he's a celebrity, and it's because it's been
Exactly.
on camera.
Yep. All right. Well, last thing we can end on is probably something a little bit lighter. Shedeur Sanders is projected right now by, I think, the Athletic as to go number one in the draft. We're not going to ask, where do you think or what number do you think he'll fall, but I'll ask,
Yeah.
where do you think would be the best spot for Shedeur to land next year?
Whew. That would have been an easier question if you asked what spot or what draft pick he'd be. You mean which team?
Which team? Yeah, which team?
Um, Man, I'd have to look over some of the NFL rosters a little bit, but I mean, 6 teams just grabbed new quarterbacks in the first round, and
Right.
so there's a lot of teams now that have that young quarterback, and you look at everybody's going to look at Dallas, because you never know what Dak's future is there, and obviously the connection, with Jerry Jones and things like that. So people are going to look there, but um, you have to look at the teams that are going to be bad this year, and say, do they need a quarterback? And if they're bad, they probably do need a quarterback, and that's where Shedeur might go, because I think he's, if not the number one pick, he's going to be a top 5 pick as long as he's healthy, because that's just how good he is, in my opinion. And so I think it'd be interesting if he goes to a Dallas. Wouldn't that be something if he goes to his dad's former team and goes to his hometown?
Right. Oh, that would be crazy. As we saw Dion Jr. even say, that would be crazy to go back home to Dallas where your pops used to play, playing in the dome. And in Jerry's world, man, that would be huge. Or I like this other, the Raiders. What about the Raiders? In Las Vegas would be big too. That's not too far from Colorado. So the
He
Raiders
would.
or Dallas, I think, would be the leading two teams.
Well, yeah, and as a Broncos fan, I would hate to see Shedeur with the Raiders, and a lot of Buff fans would hate that, because Buff
Right.
fans love the Broncos, and they Buff fans would be torn to try to root for Shedeur in a Raiders uniform. Um,
Unbelievable.
that would not go over well. I think Shedeur would probably love being in Vegas, but um, yeah, that wouldn't go
Blame it
over
on the
well.
general manager of the Broncos. Then they took Bo Nix. They should have took
I
another
know.
position and struggled a year again, another year at quarterback, and they would have had a chance at the
Which,
Shedeur sweepstake probably.
which, by the way, it was funny after the spring game. Um, on Saturday, Shedeur was done with his press conference, and he's getting up, and somebody said, "Hey, what do you think about the Broncos taking a quarterback?" And Shedeur jokingly goes, "Man, I don't know what I'm going to do now." Kind of like, well, I have no more options. But Buff fans, I know, or yeah, Buff fans are also Bronco fans, and they were kind of rooting for that as well. But
Definitely.
personally, I'd rather have Shedeur for the future than Bo Nix. But we'll see how it works out.
Definitely. All right. Shouts out to all the Colorado sports fans out there and everybody around the world checking in. No matter where you're checking in from, y'all know what to do. Get in the comment section. Leave your city, your state, or your country right now. Let us know where you're checking in from around the world. We got Brian Howell once again, buffzone.com, Bigg Dogg Chico. Brian, let them know other places they can find you at and different shows they can find you on.
Yeah, buffzone.com and Twitter or X, whatever. You see my handle right above me there. And then as well, on YouTube, on my YouTube channel is not only this show, but stuff that I do with Adam, and do that. I'll meet up with some other uh, you know media as well, and also I'm going to have some player interviews. I'm rolling one out with Colton Hood tomorrow, and have some other ones coming up this spring as well before these guys get here.
Nice. Also, stay tuned on my channel, Bigg Dogg Chico. You will see rolling out, as Brian said, tomorrow, or not tomorrow, so probably the end of this week with Pastor E. Dewey Smith, who we mentioned earlier in the show. Coach Prime's right-hand man, and looked like, unofficial recruiter for the
That's
Buffs.
right.
For the Buffs. We'll talk about that when I have him on exclusively right here. So y'all stay tuned, man. We got BuffTime podcast right here with Brian and Chico, man. We're bringing you premium primetime Buff talk. Only you can find it. You can find it only right here on both of our channels. All right, Brian, take us out, man. You brought us in. Take us out this time, man.
Hey, buff time is over. We'll see y'all next time when it's buff time again. Chico, have a good week.
I like that. Buff time is over. We up and out of this thing. Peace in the Middle East. Yeah, let's go Buffs.